Good evening and welcome to the sixth day of the 2023 Indology Festival organized by Tamil Heritage Trust. Tamil Heritage Trust, or THT, is an organization based in Chennai that is doing work in the field of India's heritage. We do this through various means, through our monthly heritage talks that are held in English and Tamil, through our annual seminars called Pecha Kacheri, through our site seminars, through our teachers outreach programs, and through the general workshops that we conduct for the public. Through the awards that we institute and host, and through which we recognize individuals who do exceptional work in the field of Indian history, heritage, and epigraphy. If you wish to know more about our programs or what we do, you can do so by visiting our website, which is www.tamilheritage.in. You could get plugged into all our events by being part of our Facebook page, Tamil Heritage Trust, or our Twitter handle, following our Twitter handle, which is Tamil Heritage TN. If you wish to receive email notification, please do so by sending us an email to admin@tamilheritage.in, and you should be able to follow all our future programs. All our previous programs are available on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube, click on Tamil Heritage Trust and click on subscribe, you should be able to receive notifications of our future events. If you wish to support us financially, you could do so by scanning this QR code that you see on the screen. Our UPI ID is also listed there on the screen. The Indology Festival, this is our third Indology Festival. We did our inaugural edition in 2020 and the second edition in 2022. This edition, the third one, is titled Sagara Sangamam, which is a 7-day event that talks about various aspects of India's connection with the sea. So India's fascinating 3,000-year journey along the long coastline that India has. So in this event, we have 14 scholars who are talking to us about various aspects of India's maritime history, like the trade, religion, politics, culture, etc. Yesterday's program, day 5, we had, first up, we had Dr. Andrea Cree, who spoke to us about the spread of Sanskritic Buddhism by sea. Following that, Dr. Rila Mukherjee spoke to us about the maritime history on the east coast of India, which is primarily the Bengal, Orissa, and the Andhra coast. If you missed all our previous programs, you can do so. You can still find them on YouTube. You can go to our YouTube channel and watch videos of our previous 5 days of this program. Today, we have 2 lectures. The first lecture is by Dr. Y. Subbarayalu. Dr. Y. Subbarayalu has a MA in Ancient History and Archaeology and MLit on Political Geography of the Chola country, both from the University of Madras. He was awarded PhD for his thesis titled State in Medieval South India by Madurai Kamaraj University. He taught ancient history in Madurai Kamaraj University for 7 years between 1976 to 83. He then served with distinction for 18 years as a professor till 2001 in the Tamil University at Tanjavur in the Department of Epigraphy and Archaeology. In between, in 1993 to 94, he was a visiting professor for South Indian History, Department of Oriental History, University of Tokyo. In 2001, he also taught in one of the premier prestigious research and higher education institutions in France, which is the EPHE in Paris. He has been associated with the French Institute of Pondicherry for over 2 decades as a researcher, head of Department Indology, and so on. During his tenure at Tamil University, Tanjavur, that is 1983 to 91, he directed archaeological excavations at Vallam, Kodumanal, and Periyapattinam. During the years 1991 to 94, he was a distinguished member of the Indo-Japanese Project for Archaeological Exploration in Vietnam, Laos, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, and Sri Lanka to study South India, Southeast Asia trade and cultural contacts. At the French Institute of Pondicherry, he coordinated the Historical Atlas of South India project. Historical archaeological societies and bodies have recognized his scholarship. He served as a member of the Syndicate of Tamil University, member Indian Council of Historical Research, 2 spells. He was honored as General President of Indian Epigraphy Society Conference in 1996 Andhra Pradesh History Congress in 2011, and Indian History Congress in 2012. He edited Avanam, an annual journal of Archaeological Society of Tamil Nadu between 1992 to 97. Dr. Y. Subbarayalu is an authority on South Indian archaeology and epigraphy, historical geography, social and economic history of medieval South India, Chola and Vijayanagara times. His numerous articles and publications stand as a testimony to his expertise. Dr. Y. Subbarayalu was awarded Hemachandra Rai Chaudhary Birth Centenary Gold Medal for the year 2014 by the Asiatic Society, Kolkata, for his outstanding contribution in early Indian history, with special emphasis on epigraphy. Hemachandra Rai Chaudhary was a historian known for his studies on ancient India, and he lived between 1892 and 1957. Dr. Subbarayalu was also the recipient of the V. Venkaiah Epigraphy Award that was instituted in 2022 by the family of Sri V. Venkaiah and hosted by Tamil Heritage Trust. We now welcome Dr. Y. Subbarayalu to deliver his lecture on a very interesting topic that is close to a lot of our hearts, the Rajendra Chola's naval expeditions to Srivijaya. So his topic is the epigraphical evidence of maritime relations of South India and Rajendra Chola's naval expeditions. We now welcome Dr. Y. Subbarayalu.
Thank you, Mr. Mahadevan, for the nice introduction. And I thank Mr. Shyam and other organizers of Tamil Heritage Trust for giving me this opportunity to talk on the present topic, South Indian traders in Southeast Asia, actually epigraphical evidence of South Indian traders in Southeast Asia. Well, this topic is very interesting, but at the same time, it is a very difficult topic because of insufficient evidence. We have some inscriptions, Tamil inscriptions in Southeast Asian countries, but compared to the inscriptions in Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka, the Tamil inscriptions in Southeast Asia are not many. They are just a handful of inscriptions. But even then, we can get some interesting details regarding the trade contacts between South India, particularly Tamil Nadu or the East Coast, including West Coast with Southeast Asia. I have some illustrations to explain the details. I will start with an introduction to the inscriptions which are found in Southeast Asia. Actually, written evidence, as I said, they are very limited. There are several inscriptions in Sanskrit in Southeast Asian countries, but they relate to religious matters and matters relating to temples. They don't give us much information about the trade contacts. From the very beginning, they are related to the religious matters only. But in the early stage, it starts from the 1st or 2nd century CE. We have a few seals and small label inscriptions found in some archaeological sites in southern part of Vietnam. That is a site called Okevo, where some excavation was conducted by French archaeologists. They got a number of seals and small label inscriptions. Many of them are in Prakrit language. They have some 1 or 2 names. Maybe they were traders from India, particularly from the west coast of India. But as far as Tamil is concerned, the earliest inscription found in Southeast Asia is the one which we got at a place called Krongthom in southern Thailand. This is a small inscription. I'll just show you the slide later. It is in Tamil. It may be dated to 4th century, around 400. But other than that, we have, after this, we have only 9th century inscriptions. One inscription in 9th century in a place called Takuapa. It is identified with Takola in literature and other references. This is on the west coast of southern Thailand, close to the earlier that is seal inscription that which I just mentioned now. This is dated to 8th century or early 9th century. Some earlier scholars thought that it may belong to a Pallava king, but we don't get any name in this inscription. But the script is can be dated to 8th century or 9th century. After that, we have a few inscriptions in the 11th century, one inscription, and most other inscriptions belong to late 12th century and 13th century only. They are spread over 4 or 5 countries in Southeast Asia. So I will explain each of them and then give some importance of these inscriptions before taking up the famous naval expedition of Rajendra first to Southeast Asia. The Tamil inscriptions, as I said, there are not many. These inscriptions were already noticed from the early part of 20th century, and a few have been published. But recently, about 20 years back, in 1990s, a Japanese team, including some Indian scholars, in which I was also a participant, undertook a kind of exploration in these countries, Southeast Asian countries, to understand the relations between South India and Southeast Asia, cultural contacts and other contacts. In the course of these explorations, this team visited almost all the countries in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, and Indonesia. And we could discover a few more inscriptions. This expedition was undertaken under the auspices of the Tokyo University. It was organized by Professor Karashima, late Karashima. So there were some specialists of Southeast Asia from Tokyo University and some epigraphists from Tamil Nadu and Mysore also. K.V. Ramesh, unfortunately, K.V. Ramesh and Professor Karashima, they are no more. They participated in this exploration. This was an interesting expedition. We could visit a number of sites along with the local archaeologists. We also visited some museums, interesting museums, where they are keeping inscriptions. And in 1 or 2 places, we could discover something new, very interesting inscriptions. So I will just explain these things. So this expedition Indo-Japanese expedition could get some more inscriptions in addition to the earlier inscriptions. All these inscriptions were published first by Professor Karashima in an edited volume. Later, it was published in another book. These are now easily available, and I have explained through these slides some of these illustrations also. I will take up one by one according to the chronology of these inscriptions. So as I said, the earliest inscription is the small label inscription found on a small stone. This was found on a greenish rectangular stone, very small stone, found in an ancient archaeological site called Kwan Luk Pat. It means a bead mound, because in this site, large number of beads were collected by explorations. It is in the Krabi province in southern Thailand. This place is close to Malaysia, that in the border area. And this small stone is now preserved in a local museum called Wat Klang Thom Temple Museum nearby. So until we visited this site, visited this museum, nobody knew about this inscription. So when it was shown, when the curator showed us this stone, immediately we could recognize a small Tamil inscription, and we could easily read it. It is in what's called in the transitional Tamil Brahmi inscription. It reads Perum Padan Kal, meaning the stone of Perum Padan. Actually, from the stone, we can say it is a gold assayer's stone or gold tester's stone. It is a small stone, but interestingly, it belongs to around 400, very early, and certainly we can say that this goldsmith was accompanying some merchants to this place. You know, this Southeast Asia generally is called Swarnadvipa. Well, Swarnadvipa, we cannot pinpoint which is the actual locality, but generally all over this area is called Swarnadvipa. That is, people went there for several things, particularly aromatic substances, gold and tin. So in this case, this Perumpadan Kal is a gold assayer's stone, means so a gold tester or some merchants dealing in gold, they were visiting this area. So this is actually that southern Thailand. And a little later, some few centuries later, we find another Tamil inscription in the same locality, which is found in a place called Takuopa. Takuopa is actually, as I mentioned earlier, it is identified with the Takola mentioned in literature. It is also mentioned in Tamil inscriptions. This Takuopa, it is the name of a river, and there is a site nearby, so it is called Takuopa. Actually, in this locality, some images of Vishnu and other associated images were found. So maybe it is a Vishnu temple. There was a Vishnu temple, but it's already dilapidated. We could not trace the actual structure. But these images have been removed to a museum. And the stone containing the inscription is also kept in that museum. This inscription, of course, noticed very early. It was first published by the famous epigraphist E. Hughes, And later it was commented by K.A. Nilakant Sastri. It was published in Journal of Oriental Research of Kupsan Sastri Institute. This inscription is slightly broken. The early part is broken. So that first sentence is supposed to be the name of a king, but it's not so clear. Varamanku is there. It may be a king's name. We do not know the later part of the king's name. Then second line is Mantana Nankarayan. Nankarayan. Actually, the reading is a little different from what Nilakant Sastri took. This is the reading of E. Hughes. Nankarayan, Totta Kulam, Per Sri Naranam, Manikramatharkum, Sena Mugatharkum. Then another word is the broken word, Adaikalam. So the meaning is very simple, that a person who may be called Nankarayan, well, it was read as Nangu something, but actually it is broken, of course. He dug a tank. It may be for drinking purpose or for irrigation purpose, we do not know. So it was dug by this man, Totta Kulam. Totta is to dig. And it is called Sri Naranam. Sri Naranam. Nilakanta Sastri read as Veera Naranam. Actually, there is no place for Veera Naranam. It is Sri Naranam only. Hughes read it like that. And we examined the stone, and it's clear. It is only Sri Naranam. So Sri Naranam means it is in the name of the Vishnu. The tank is called. Tank is named. And this tank was put under the protection of some three bodies. The first body is called Manikramam, Manikramatharkum, then Sena Mugatharkum, and another body, it is not clear because it is broken, Adaikalam. So these people have to protect. This Manigramam is a trade guild which is found in South India in the 8th century, from 8th century onwards. First, it is noticed on the Kerala coast, and then it is found in many places in the interior. So this is Manigram is supposed to be a variant of Vaniga Gramam. That is merchant guild Gramam. This Vanigramam is earlier noticed in Kannada inscriptions in the 5th century also. And slowly it develops, and it is found in many places in Tamil Nadu, and both in the interior and on the coastal sides. And interestingly, in this inscription around 800, this is found in Thailand, on the west coast of Thailand. And there is another body called Chenamukam. Chenamukam is taken as a military body. Actually, it is also a trade body, because it is found again in other places with the traders. And in short form, it is called Senai. It is from Sreni. It is a trading body only. And so the third body also should be a trading body. We do not know which is that body. In Kerala coast, we have one Manigramam and another body, foreign merchants, that is Arabic merchants. They had a guild called Anjuvannam. I do not know whether we can read here Anjuvannatharkum. It is possible, but it's not so clear. So this records that a tank dug by Nankarayan was called Sri Naranam and was put under the protection of Manigramam, Senamukam, and another body. Both these inscriptions, that is the earlier one, that Permadankal inscription, and this one, are located close to the isthmus of Kra, through which there is a narrow, that island is very narrow at that part, that southern part of Thailand. And So through this narrow land route, there was a land route connecting the west coast to east coast. There passed a portage route connecting the west coast port of Kao near Takoapa to the east coast port of Liam Po near Chaya. It connects the Gulf of Siam. From Gulf of Siam, then we can proceed further to Vietnam and China and other places. So this land route, though somewhat arduous one, was preferred to the circuitous sea route passing through the Malacca Strait to reach South China Sea. Manigram, can I see the next slide, please?
Yes.
That map, please. Either earlier one, earlier, this one. So here, this is the Takoapa, and the Parambadan was somewhere here. So this is a narrow passage, a narrow land route. So connecting the west coast to the east Gulf of Siam, and then it can go to China. So this is a shorter route, but very difficult route, because they have to download the merchandise here, then they take it on donkeys or bullocks, then they have to pass through this land route, and again they have to transfer to boats. But anyway, sometimes they preferred this road, because this long sea route through the Strait of Malacca Strait, sometimes it was there was some problem. Some people obstructed, so naturally they preferred this route, it seems. So you have several small ports on the west coast as well as on the east coast. Manigram, so among the two merchant bodies, Manigram is a merchant guild which was active in Kerala coast, I have explained. On the Kerala coast, it was associated with the West Asian trade guild called Anjuvannam in the famous port town of Kollam. Sanamugam, which was taken as a military body by Hughes and others, was actually another trade guild found mentioned in some inscriptions of Java and also in Nagapattinam. We have some in the interior also. Chronologically, the next inscription is the one found in Lobotwo, also spelt as Lobotova, near Barus. This is the site Barus. This is the Sumatra Island, part of Indonesia now. So on the west coast, just almost to the northern part of the Sumatra, there is a port town called Barus. Nearby Lobotwo, there is another small port. This inscription was found in this site. It is written on a standing stone, which 6 sides. The inscription is written on 3 sides of this hexagonal stone. The stone was broken into 3 pieces, and it has been restored. Now it is kept in the museum, National Museum of Jakarta, Indonesia, the capital town of Indonesia. This inscription is dated in Saka 1010, month Masi, which corresponds to 1088 CE. The date is very clear. This inscription was brought to the notice of E. Hughes, epigraphist to Government of Madras, as early as 1890, and it was briefly reported by him in Madras Epigraphy Report, 1891-92. As the stone was already badly broken, Hughes could not make out a full text of the inscription from the ink copies he received from Dr. J. Brandes, and therefore his brief but intelligent note alone was available on the inscription until 1993. So this note was made in 1890. Until 1993, his note alone was referred to again and again. And actually, Nilakanta Sastri, on the basis of this note, wrote a long article, of course, using some other merchant guild inscriptions. It's a very interesting article by Nilakanta Sastri. So he made it popular, this note by Hughes. So it was thought that stone, that broken stone is no more available. Nobody noticed this inscription again, either by the local archaeologists, epigraphists, or anybody else. But then it was a very surprising when it was discovered, rediscovered in the National Museum in the Jakarta. See, when our team, which I mentioned earlier, visited this museum, National Museum, they are keeping a inscriptional gallery, very beautiful inscriptional gallery, very beautifully kept. All the stones they have removed, that stray stones, inscriptional stones, they have brought to this museum and very nicely displayed. And when we were permitted to see these inscriptions, see the stones, we could discover this stone. So this is the stone, Baro's inscription. It is broken into three pieces, but the archaeologists, they have restored it. They have pasted and they are keeping as one stone. It was a very interesting discovery. But for this small break here and here, otherwise the inscription is almost intact. I will read this inscription. Swasthistri Sakarayandu 1010 Chella Nindra Masi Tingal Varosana Madangari Vallava Tesi Uyakonda Patinathu Velapurathu Kudi Niranda Tesi Tisai Vilangu Tisayayathu Anyuttu Varum Nam Maganar Nagara Senapati Nattu Chettiyarkum 11 பூமி தேசி அப்பர்க்கும் மாவேத்துகளுக்கும் நாம் வைத்து கொடுத்த பரிசாவது மரக்கல. So this is a broken place. That one sentence is almost damaged. We cannot restore it. Anyway, la is found in the beginning. Then next sentence, it again starts with la. La Marakkala Nayanam Evigalam Kasturi Vilai Mudal Agapada Anju Tundayam Ponnum Kuduthu Pavadai Erakadavadagavum Ippadiki Ikal Elidi Nati Kudutho 11 Bhumi Desi Disaivalangu Disayayirathu Anyuttu Varum Aram Maravarka Arame Thunai. The inscription is very clear. It can be easily understood by Tamil knowing people. But for others, I just translate. In the Saka year 1010 current, month Masi, we, the 500 of the 1000 directions. This is the name of the trade guild. We, the 500 of the 1000 directions, having met at the Velapuram in Varochu. Varochi is the old name, old Tamil name of Barus. Barus is the local name and it is Tamilized as Varochu. Also called Madangari Vallava Desi Uyakonda Pattinam. Decided to grant to our sons the Nagara Senapati Nattu Chettiyar, to Padinan Bhumi Desi Appar, and to the Mavettugal. Mavettugal or Mavettugal. That is the ship's owner, perhaps that there should be that the ship's owner, the ship's captain, Marakkala Nayan, and crew, KV, will pay the fee, Anju Tundayam in gold, pegged to the price of Kasturi. So on the basis of the price of kasturi, and then only may step on the cloth spread, that is, enter the town to trade. Thus we, the 500 of the 1,000 directions, known in every direction, in all the 18 lands, had the stone inscribed and planted. Do not forget charity. Charity alone will help you. So this is mostly in Tamil, except one or two words in Sanskrit, that Swastisri and Chaka, like that. This inscription is so far the first clear evidence for the maritime activities of the Ayavole Trade Guild, and for having established a permanent outpost on the west coast of Sumatra, which had been famous for its camphor and gold deposits at that time. The local port town Barus itself was given an alternative name to proclaim the guild's more or less permanent trading interests there. So this Desi Uyakonda Pattinam is named by the traders. And this inscription gives us the earliest reference to Marakkala Nayan, captain of the ship. So this Marakkala Nayan, of course, in Kannada inscription sometimes we get Marakkala, there is no Nayan. But here in Tamil we get full name Marakkala Nayan, which is obviously the early form of Marakkayar that was used to denote the Muslim traders of the Kerala and the Tamil Nadu coast from the early 16th century onwards. It may also be noted that this inscription falls in the reign of Kulothunga I, who seems to have taken much interest in sea trade and maintained friendly relations with the Srivijaya king ruling over the Malay Peninsula, that is Kedah, Kadaram, Sumatra, etc. Two messengers from the king of Srivijaya visited the Chola court in 1090 to request the king for some changes in the property rights on the land given to the Buddhist vihara built at Nagapattinam by the previous king of Srivijaya. Well, this we'll take up a little later. Further, Visakhapatnam, which was called Kulothunga Chola Patnam after Kulothunga, has an inscription of the Anjuvannam Guild dated in 1090, just 2 years after the Barus inscription. So there was an active trade relations between the east coast of South India and Southeast Asia. So this Visakhapatnam and these Barus inscriptions are point us to that direction. So this Visakhapatnam inscription has a Tamil as well as Telugu version and vouches for the close association of the Anjuvannam Guild of the West Asian traders and the Ayavole Guild. We have the next inscription again in southern Thailand. It is called Wat Pra Mahatat inscription. Well, there is a Buddhist temple. It is called Wat Pra Mahatat. So since this inscription is kept there, it is called Wat Mahapratat inscription. This inscription is found inscribed on a slab presently in the town. It is now kept in a museum in the town of Nakhon Si Thammarat, southern Thailand. The slab is written on both sides. One side of the inscription is completely in Tamil language. The next one. This is in Brahmi characters and the local language, but the other side, this is in Tamil. We have Tamil, of course, mixed with some Sanskrit letters. The back side is written in Grantha script and in Thai language, mixed with Sanskrit. The Sagar date is damaged. Most probably it is Saka 1105, equivalent to 1183 CE. No king's name seems to have been mentioned in the inscription. It records that some big person with the title Dhanma Senapati made a grant to Brahmanas, which was divided into 3 shares. The donor may have been a merchant. He's called Dharma Senapati. The inscription has a long imprecatory portion, usually found in contemporary inscriptions in Tamil Nadu, cursing those who dare to obstruct the charity. The latter part of the inscription seems to be in Thai language, that is on the other side. That portion has not yet been read satisfactorily. It is possible that it conveys the same information in the local language. So this I will just read quickly. Anju Chandrathu Petra Tingal Kalamayum Devarana Dharma Senapati Udutta Parisavadu, that is broken. Brahmanar pay something. Dharma Senapathigal Sorpadi Moonru Kuritu Makkalukkum, this is broken in various places. Dhanmam Seyyavum Ippadi Dhanmam Seidathai Alivu Seidar Undakil. So up to this, there is that grand portion. After this, the latter half is fully covered with imprecation. That is cursing the people who will damage the inscription. Ayiram Kurapasu Kondra Pavamum, etc. So this is a curse which is found in the Tamil inscriptions in Tamil Nadu also. Anyway, it is broken, but we can only guess that maybe a merchant made a gift to some local Brahmins in here. So maybe these Brahmins were priests of this temple. So this is in the late 12th century. After this, we have two inscriptions in Sumatra. Actually, there must be more inscriptions, but the known inscriptions, there are three. Now I will read two of these inscriptions. Orlak Dolak and Batu Bapahat inscriptions. There are three inscriptions, more or less belonging to the 13th century in Sumatra part of Indonesia. Two of them are bilingual. So we saw that Barus is also in Sumatra. So these the inscriptions are also again in Sumatra, but they are in the interior. Two of them are bilingual. The first one is in Porlak Dolak in Padang Lawas area. That is in the northwestern part of Sumatra. It is supposed to be Padang Highlands. The language is in Old Malay and Javanese and the Tamil language. And refers to an unnamed ruler of East Java with his royal title Paduga Sri Maharaja. In Tamil also it is mentioned Peridu Sri Maharaja in Tamil portion, for whose merit a military official called Deepankara made some grant. The Saka date, which is a bit damaged, would work out to either 1258 or 1265 November. The inscription reads like this: Swasti Sri Saka Vashatita Kartika Masa Sukla Paksha Ekaditi Sukravara Revati Nakshatra. This is in Javanese language. Lanan Senapati Rakan Deepankara Mata Pa Hiditallaha Kanga Sabarana Manana Mananya Deepankara Haligya Rakan Punya Paduga Sri Maharaja. The same thing is again found in Tamil. Sakarayandu 1108, that the last letter is gone. Tihai Masathu, maybe it is Kartiki Masathu, Ekadasi, Revadi Nakshatrathu, Challanandra, that is broken. Then Deepankara Kanda, then again there is a gap. Chakamana Paduvatta Tum Peridu Sri Maharaja. So this alone is clear. Peridu Sri Maharaja. The same is written in Javanese as Paduka Sri Maharaja. So this is supposed to be a king's name. John Wiseman Christie, an American scholar who is a specialist in Indonesian history, she has written many things about the South Indian textile trade with Southeast Asia. She has pointed out that this king could be Krutanagara of the Singosari state, as the same official Deepankara seems to be referred to in a 1286 inscription, 86 CE inscription of keys found at Padang Rojo, 300 kilometers farther south, again in Sumatra. Interestingly, this later inscription refers to the fact that the statue of the Buddhist Amoghapasa, Buddhist, he may be a small deity, Amoghapasa, was brought to Swarnadvipa. So here, Sumatra is called Swarnadvipa from Bhumi, Java. From Bhumi, Java, that is from Java country, this was brought that Sumatra, that is, which is called Swarnadvipa, at the instance of Krutanagara, that is the king. This may suggest that the camphor and gold resources of the north and west Sumatra area had attracted both the Tamils and the Javanese merchants. That the Tamil traders continued to occupy this area even after is suggested by the second mentioned bilingual inscription found at Batu Bapahat in Padang Highlands of West Sumatra. Actually, this inscription is referred to by Christie, but this text of this inscription is not available for study. Christie thinks that it could be dated on paleographical basis to about the 14th century. She has seen it. She thinks it is a mixed Tamil Grantha inscription in a local version of Sanskrit. It is again written in Javanese influenced Central Sumatran script, similar to that used for the inscriptions of King Adityavarman, who ruled in the Padang Highlands in the mid-14th century. The right-hand text comprises 13 lines, according to Christie, written in Tamil language. Unfortunately, this inscription is lost. It could not be traced now, except for the statement of Christie. Then we have another third inscription in the same Sumatra island. This is called Niesu Aceh inscription. This is the inscription. It is now in a museum. This inscription was found in a mosque of Niesu Aceh in the suburbs of present Banda Aceh, North Sumatra in 1990. So a French archaeologist got this photo and sent it to my colleague, L. Tyagarajan. He could not read it completely because that the photo was not clear. But again, this was sent later by another French archaeologist to me. I could read it on one side clearly, but the other side is not so clear. So the text is given here. It is written on both sides of a tall stone, which is presently housed at the Provincial Museum of Nangro Aceh, Banda Aceh. The inscription on this is on the northern steep of the Sumatra island. The text on the second side containing the later half of the inscription can be deciphered to a large extent. This can be dated to the 13th century on paleographical grounds. As the beginning portion is completely illegible, the full purport cannot be made out. But from the remaining portion, we can say it seems the record relates to a merchant guild, similar to that mentioned in the Baro's inscription, as the term Nammakkal, usually found in trade guild inscription, is met with care. In the beginning of 7 lines are found some stipulations which have something to do with gold trade. Lines 7 to 13 seem to refer to gold testers and the testing stone. The passage may be translated as the stone which they use for rubbing. That's the name, Tamil term is Urai Varum, should be handed over to the Vakal Kammalayalar. This seems to be a Sumatran word. It is not Tamil, maybe to refer to some local officials. Kammalayalar. The following lines, 15 to 18, give the stipulation that no interest should be collected. Finally, the agents, Nam Makkal, are asked to obey the conditions mentioned in this record in future also. Line 24 gives the benediction, let there be prosperity. I'll quickly read. Kavum Poki Ulladu Kai Kolla Kadavadalla Idukku Urai Varum Tam Kallai. So this, I think, gold stone, saying stone, testing stone. Vakal Kamailar Ullita Chevithu Unbargal Vandu Koduboha Kadavar Galagavum. So the officials will come and collect the stone. Kolla Kadavada. Polisei Kolla Kadavargal Allavahum. That is, they should not collect any interest. It is not clear, but Polisei is a Tamil word for interest. Pirahum, even after that, Nammakkal, Ikalvetukku Okka, Seya Kadavargal Ahavum. Well, if we know the earlier portion, we can interpret the inscription fully, but only partly available. But anyway, from the available stone as an inscription, we can say it's something to do with gold testers, and maybe it relates to some gold trade again. So there are two more inscriptions which I will quickly read. There is one in Pagan in Myanmar, that is Burma, old Burma. And there is an interesting inscription of about the 12th century. This is not illustrated here. It's not given in the slide, which is partly in Sanskrit and partly in Tamil. The slab containing this inscription was originally in a still existing Vaishnava temple. Now it is preserved in the Pagan National Museum. So this is the interesting thing. Wherever you go, the countries, the local governments of all the Southeast Asian countries, they are quite, they have taken good interest in preserving the old things, whether they are local things or foreign things. The Tamil inscriptions are local inscriptions. So all these stones, broken stones or stray stones, they are kept now in good condition in some local museum. So that way they are quite well preserved. The slab containing this inscription was originally in that way Vaishnava temple. Now it is a National Museum. The Sanskrit part has a beautiful verse from Mukutamala written by the Vaishnava saint Kulasekara Alvar, expressing his intense devotion to God Vishnu. I will just read only the Tamil portion. Swasti Sri Tiruchelvam Peruga Bukkam Ana. So this is the old name of Pagan. The place is now called Pagan. Bukkam Ana Arivattana Parattu Nanadesi Vinnagar Alvar. So this is a Vishnu temple. Nanadesi Vishnu Vinnar Alvar Koil Thiru Mandapamum Seidu Thiru Kadavum Ittu இந்த மண்டபத்துக்கு நின்று எரிகைக்கு நிலை விளக்கு ஒன்றும் இட்டேன். So for this Vishnu temple, a person made a front mandapa, constructed a front mandapa. It is a new addition, and he put a lamp and for burning perpetually. Nindru erigaikku. Who is that? He is called Malai Mandalathan. Malai Mandalannu. So Malai Mandalathu, it is in Malayalam accent. Malai Mandalannu Mahodayar Pattanathu. Mahodayar Pattanam is that is old Chara capital. It is near Musiri. Now it is excavated. மகோதயர் பட்டணத்து இராயிரன் சிறியானான சி குலசேகர நம்பியேன் இது ஸ்ரீ இத்தன்மம் ஸ்ரீ தன்மம் மலை மண்டலத்தான். So this charity is called Malai Mandalathan because he came from Malai Mandalam, that is from Kerala. So interestingly, even though he is from Kerala, he uses mostly Tamil, of course, with a slight Malayalam mixture. So at that time, the traders, South Indian traders who visited Southeast Asia, they used Tamil as a lingua franca. That is very interesting. All these trade guild inscriptions are in Tamil only. Of course, it's a mixture of Sanskrit. The last inscription which we have to see is, it is found in China. It is not in Southeast Asia, it is outside Southeast Asia, but anyway, it is related to this Eastern trade. It is a place called at Guangzhou. At present, you can recognize it as opposite to Taiwan on the Chinese coast, that is on the east coast of China, just facing Taiwan. It is the town is a famous town, Guangzhou. In those days, it was a very live port town where most of the foreign traders went there and stayed there. Actually, the Chinese government had asked all these foreign traders to visit this town and stay there before visiting their capital. So this Tamil inscription is the one from the famous medieval port of Guangzhou in southern China. Presently, the stone is in the display of a Xiamen University Museum in Guangzhou. The inscription is engraved on a single stone, now broken into two pieces. The first 5 lines are in Tamil language and Tamil Grantha script, and the 6th line in Chinese language and characters. The Chinese inscription has not been deciphered so far satisfactorily. The Tamil inscription opens with Sanskrit invocation to Hara, that is Shiva, followed by the date. It records the installation of the deity called Thiru Kanichuram Udaya Nayanar for the health of the king Segache Khan, also spelt as Segache Khan, by Sambandha Perumal Ana, that is alias Tavachakravartigal, obviously a Saiva religious leader, with the permission of the king. The permission is mentioned as Farman. Farman is an Arabic term used in Chinese also for permission, king's permission. So the text reads like this: Haraha Swastisri Sagabdam 1203 சித்திரை நாள் ஸ்ரீ செகச்சை கான் திருமேனிக்கு நன்றாக உடையார் திரு காணீச்சுரமுடைய நாயனாரை ஏறி அருளப் பண்ணினார் சம்பந்த பெருமாளான தவச்சக்கரவர்த்திகள் செகச்சை கான் பர்மான் படி. The Chinese inscription could not be fully deciphered. Now recently some attempts have been made, still it is not explained satisfactorily. So most probably it may be have the same substance as Tamil inscription. So we can translate this as obedience to Haraha. Let there be prosperity on the day of Chitra in the month of Chitrai in the Saka year 1203, April 15, 1281 CE. The Tavachakravartigal, so he is a saint, Sambandha Perumal, a Saiva religious leader, graciously caused in accordance with the Farman, written permission of Segache Khan, the Mongol ruler, the installation of the god Thiru Kaniswaramudaya Nayanar for the welfare of the king Segache Khan. The date 1281 falls in the reign of the Mongol emperor Kublai Khan, the famous Kublai Khan. Most probably Segaji Khan is another name of the emperor, or perhaps a brother. We do not know clearly. Though the Shiva temple mentioned in the inscription is not in existence now, archaeologists and art historians have pointed out, who have visited this site and who have explored this site, pointed out the art remains of the temple built into the city's main Buddhist temple and those in the collection of the local museum. So they are found in several places, and in some houses also. On the walls of the houses, some stones are built in, containing some sculptures. It is believed that the temple existed in the southeastern sector of the old ports of the city, where the foreign traders' enclave was located. Marco Polo, who visited the city, stated that Indian traders were very active there in the 1280s and 90s. So this inscription is dated in 1281, when Kublai Khan visited. The year of the establishment of the temple coincides with the peak of South Indian trade in the port, when there took place several exchanges of envoys between China and South India. We have other evidence to say that there were exchanges between the Pandyan kings and China at that time. At that time, it was Pandya who was ruling in the south. However, the subsequent government restrictions of the Chinese emperor imposed on Chinese merchants seem to have discouraged thereafter the direct trade relations of the South Indian merchants. So I have mentioned all the inscriptions found in Southeast Asia. One or two inscriptions are missing, but otherwise we have. Can I go to this slide, please?
Which slide, sir?
Southeast Asia with map.
The earlier map, this one, or little down?
This is okay. This is okay.
Okay.
So you have all these inscriptional sites, except Myanmar, are noted here. You have Takopa, that this Mahatat inscription, Nakonsi Tamarat, that is the town. That Kuan Lukpat. Then you have Aceh. This is on the almost on the northern tip of Sumatra. These are two interesting, important places later. You have Kota China, and there is Pasai, a place called Pasai here. This Pasai was later became very important port town, and it had trade relations with Visakhapatnam. We have I mentioned an inscription, bilingual inscription. There we have another inscription, Telugu inscription, where Pasai, a merchant from Pasai is mentioned in the 12th century. So that way, this is very important. Then you have Barus and Porlak Dolak. Batu Bahapat should be somewhere here. This is that Padang Lavas. Then this is Palembang, that is the capital of Srivijaya. So Srivijaya is here. And this here, Okevo, I said that very early site. This is that Okevo, and that is the Gulf of Mekong River. Next, another map, please, that where we have it. Yeah, this is that Guangzhou. This is Taiwan, Guangzhou. Here you have this bilingual inscription, the last inscription, where 1281 inscription. So these are the inscriptions found here. So you can see the concentration is in the Malay Peninsula, and of course in Thailand also. And in between you have this Malacca Strait. So the ships going from South India to China or to Southeast Asia, they have to pass through this Malacca Strait and go to China. They don't circuit this area. They don't go around the Sumatra. This seems to be not so safe route, so they don't go there. So mostly you find this route as important. So now if we take this naval expedition of Rajendra the First, this route, that Sumatra Strait, the trade route through this Sumatra Strait, where you have this Singapore at present. Earlier there was Malacca here, and now it is Singapore. And this was from very early times, this was a very important trade route, sea route from South India to China through Southeast Asia. Now we will take up the importance of these inscriptions. Even though these inscriptions are few. So this is in Myanmar, that Pagan. Except that Baru's inscription, Baru's and that Pagan inscription, these two inscriptions directly refer to this trade guild. This was actually a local town of the trade guild, and they named this Barus. They have given a Tamil name, a long Tamil name, Viyakonda Chola, Viyakonda Pattinam, Madangari Vallava, Viyakonda Pattinam. So it had, the old name is Barus, but they named it because they had a permanent settlement there. So the Velapuram is the harbor area. They met at the Velapuram, that harbor area, and decided this thing. So whoever visited this thing from South India, they had to pay some tax to the local agent, and then only they can enter this town for trading purpose. That is the importance of that inscription. Now these inscriptions do not mention any article of trade. Of course, here that this Baru inscription refers to Kasturi Vilai Mudalagapada. Kasturi is musk. It is an incense taken from civet cat, but that cannot be the only trade item. Actually, this Sumatra was important for camphor and also gold. So actually the traders should have gone there for gold and camphor and maybe other aromatic substances also. So all these places, they are important for tin, gold, and these aromatic substances. So these South Indian traders should have gone there for trading in these rare articles found there. And in exchange, they might have given their textiles. But that we do not know, because these inscriptions do not refer these trade items. That is very disappointing. So, of course, Christie, that American scholar, from various other sources, she has collected some information that the textiles must have been very important trade item between the South Indian traders and Southeast Asian traders. Of course, from 16th century onwards, this textile trade is very much attested to by Portuguese and other colonial traders. So that textile trade must have started very early, maybe from the Chola times onwards, or even from the 9th century onwards. So that much we can say from these inscriptions. Textiles, pepper, and iron may have been given in exchange by the Tamil and other South Indian traders. But actually, we cannot consider Tamil merchants alone. There were other merchants, West Asian merchants, along with the Tamil merchants. So I mentioned that on the west coast of South India, you have a body called Anjuvannam, along with the Manigramam in the 9th century Chera inscription. This Anjuvannam is a trading body of West Asian merchants. They were Arabs, Persians, and others. And by religion, they belong to various people, Syrian Christians, Muslims, Jews, and all these people were there. But all of them together, they were called as just Anjuvannam. That is a collective name for the trading body. So that is well attested in the Chera inscription. And later they are found on the west coast of Kerala as well as on the east coast. And then you find them in the Southeast Asian inscription, in some Javanese inscriptions also. That was earlier, it was not recognized by the local epigraphies, but now we can, if you have some name which is very close to Anjuvannam, we can recognize from in these inscriptions. So this Anjuvannam Trade Guild went along with this Manigramam to Southeast Asia because they were trading partners on the west coast and then on the east coast also. They were there in Southeast Asia also. That much we can say. And then, of course, in the 13th century, many of these merchants from Bengal, Orissa coast, and all these people are mentioned here with various names, local names are mentioned. And then actually in Marco Polo's evidence, all these merchants are mentioned by their nationality and by their language also, who are there in Kwanzu. So in that way, this trade was going on from 9th century onwards until 13th century. That much we can say. Then, so that, well, there is other thing, other side of the picture. Earlier, from India, the Buddhists and other religionists, Buddhists, Saivites, and other people also went there. Maybe they went along with the merchants and then they propagated this first Buddhists and then Saivites and other people, Vaishnavas. All these people are found in various places. There you have temples also. And so some of our Tamil inscriptions also are found in some temples. That much we can say. But the trade, as the pure trade inscriptions are not many. They are not found in these temples. There are not many temples. There are some Sanskrit inscriptions or inscriptions written in local languages, but they relate to some rituals and such things alone. They don't refer to Tamil traders. Now, our friend Dr. Syam asked me, so this lecture should not be just inscriptions of traders. We have to mention, we have to deal with this naval expedition of Rajendra, because otherwise it will not be complete. So I will briefly, mention that naval expedition, even though we have very limited evidence regarding this naval expedition also. Anyway, we can tell something about this expedition. So this naval expedition is mentioned in Tamil inscriptions only, in Rajendra's inscription only, but later in mainly in Rajendra's inscription. Unfortunately, none of the Rajendra's inscriptions are found in Southeast Asia, which he is supposed to have invaded and conquered. So this conquest, this naval expedition, is mentioned in what's called the Maikirti or Prasasti part, eulogy part of Rajendra's inscriptions from his 14th regnal year onwards. Actually, K.G. Krishnan thought that it is found from 13th century, 13th year itself. But actually, that is doubtful. What Krishnan referred to, that inscription is not so authentic, not so supportive of this expedition. So K. Nilakanta Sastri definitely dates it from the 14th regnal year. From 14th year onwards, the Maikirti refers to continuously this expedition. It is mentioned briefly in this Maikirti. So I will just read that. I omitted the earlier portion. Alaigadal Nadul Palakalang Seleti Sangrama Vijayotunga Vanmanahiya Kidar Tarasanai Vagayam Purgadal Kumbakariodum Agapaduthu Urimil Prakia Perinadi Prakamum Arthavan Aganagar Porturir Vasalil Vichadra Toranamum Moitolir Punaimani Pudavamum Kanamani Kadavamum Niraisi Vijayamum Turainir Pannayum Panmalayur Eir Tonmalayurum all Kadal Ahal Sul Mayiru Dingamum. All Kadal Ahal Sul Mayiru Dingamum. Kalanga Vinay Ilanga Sokamum. Sometimes it is called Ilanga Chopamum. Kapuru Neripunal Ma Papalamum. Kavalam Purisei Me Ilimbangamum. Vilaipandurudai Valaipandurum. Kalaitakur Pukal Talaitakolamum. Tidama Valvini Ma Tamalingamum. Kalamudir Kaduntiral Lamuri Desamum. Tenakavar Vodil Ma Nakavaramum. Todugadar Kaval Kadumurat Kadaramum. Maperantandar Kunda O Parakesari Panmarana Udayar Sri Rajendra Chola Devarku Yandu 15வது. Well, it is found in 14th year itself, but this is in an inscription found at Tirukadayur. So here you find, can I go to the table, please?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the places mentioned in this Maikirti or eulogy part. Actually, all these names are given some attributes, what you call in Tamil Adaimuri, very ornamental attributes, and it always precedes with Ma or Maha. So we have to separate that attributes and to get the actual names. So these are the names. Of course, earlier when the first epigraphists read this inscription, they could not get the full meaning. Then slowly, many people tried, and with the help of French epigraphists like Sides and other people, many people actually contributed to the explanation of this inscription. I mean, to the correct identification of all these places in Southeast Asia, and particularly in the Sumatra and Thailand localities. So we have about 13 places are mentioned. So it starts with the Sri Vijaya. So actually the capital is mentioned first. Then this order is mentioned. But this order is not according to the order of it could not be according to the order of the conquest. If you see the map, these places are found in different localities. See, for instance, Ilangavasavam is there. This is Irudingam. Irudingam. You should not use Ma. It is Irudingam. Tamralingam. Tamalingam. Then we have that, what you call Srivijaya is here. Then other places are there. They are not in the actual order which is found in the inscription. So then finally it mentions Nakavaram and then Kadaram. So Kadaram is here, and Nakabar, that is Nicobar Island, Southern Nicobar, it is here. So they are in different places. So it cannot be the order of the conquest. So it seems the people, I mean the navy, the fleet would have gone this way, maybe through this Nakavaram, or it might have skipped first Nakavaram and go to this Malacca Straits and then to this Srivijaya. Srivijaya is in the southern part, Srivijaya. And other parts are there on the eastern coast. All of these are on the eastern coast of Sumatra, and some are on the east coast of Malaysia, and some places are on the west coast of Malaysia and Thailand. So you have Papala, then you have Takola. It is called Talai Takola. Actually, it is Takola and Kadara. So these are on the west coast of Thailand and Malaysia, and east coast of Malaysia. And again, you have on the east coast of this thing. And he did not go to Java. So this is actually Srivijaya. Srivijaya was actually a maritime empire. Actually, it is not a land empire. Most of their kingdom or empire consisted number of port cities. So each port can be called a small chiefdom. So all this together is called Srivijaya. But for Tamils, it was called Kadaram. So they used Srivijaya and Kadaram as if same name. Because for the Tamils, Kadaram is the first destination. First, they are touching when they go to to the east coast, the Malaysia, they first touch this Kadaram, and then only they can pass to go to Srivijaya. So they mistook Srivijaya and Kadara as of the same names. So sometimes they call the king of Kadara, sometimes they call Srivijaya king. So in the Leiden grant, which refers to this, two Leiden grants are there, are what you call Anemangalam grants. First grant was given by Rajaraja first in his last years, and then it was completed by his son Rajendra first, and later Kulothunga first again gave some additional grant to the same Buddhist vihara. This Buddhist vihara was built in Nagapattinam by the king of Kadara, or Vijaya, that Mara Vijayatungavarman. So he named this vihara as Sudamani or Sudamani Vihara after his father's name. So his father was no more. So he built in his father's name this vihara in Nagapattinam. So when this vihara was built, the Cholas and the Srivijayan king, they were friends. That is in the last years of Rajaraja. And even in the first in the first few years of Rajendra, the friendly relations continued. Some messengers from Srivijaya, they came to Nagapattinam with some gold gifts. So that was gifted to some temple in Nagapattinam. So that means the early part of Rajendra, this Srivijaya king and Chola kings, they were friendly. Then why in the some 10 years later, this expedition took place? That is a mystery. We do not know. The reason is not mentioned. But anyway, the Rajendra claims that he defeated this Mara Vijayatunga and he took many of these places and returned well victoriously. That much we can say. But what he actually brought some trophies of these Toranas, the gateways. See, in the Southeast Asia and in China and other places, these gateways in most of the towns are very important. Gateway is a kind of marker of that town. So maybe it was an important thing for those people. And Rajendra thought they are very important trophies to take back to his country. But actually, we do not know any remains of these trophies in the Chola, in any of the Chola towns. We don't have any of these things. So except this inscription, we do not have any remains of this naval expedition. So that's why I say it is a mysterious thing. And why did it happen? Most probably it is again it is guessed by various scholars. So when these people, this area was visited by the Tamil traders from early times. So they were visiting these places, and we have say 9th century inscription is there. Then in the time of Klotunga, we have that Barus inscription, 1080 or so. We have that Barus inscription. In between, we do not have any inscription. So the traders might have been going there. And so the traders means that they have to go to trade with merchandise, giving merchandise here and taking back this merchandise of these people to South India. But they also visited China through this Malacca Straits. They went further to China, and they also traded with China. So the trade with China was important for all these people, for South Indians as well as the Srivijayan and Southeast Asian people. So for some reason, it seems this Srivijayan king obstructed the South Indian traders to trade with China, because they can obstruct easily by obstructing this route, that Malacca Strait route. Otherwise, the merchants cannot, they have to take land route. It is very difficult route. They cannot go around this route. It is again difficult. So once they obstructed and closed this Malacca Straits, the Tamil traders cannot go to China. So earlier we have some embassies from Rajaraja to China. After that, we have embassy only in the time of Klotunga the first. In between, you don't have any embassies. So in between, something happened, and some due to some trade rivalry, these people might have obstructed the Tamil traders going to China. That may be a reason for the starting of this expedition. That much we can say. And how did he took this expedition? That is again a big mystery. Well, we are very proud of this Pala, the Algadaru Nadubut Pala Salanseliti. He went there, so he took a big fleet. But what was the nature of this fleet? That we do not know. So I have just made a small guess. using Tamil inscriptions. We have Tamil inscriptions. Can we go to the last slide? Yeah, this is the. So this is found in an inscription at a place called Krishnapatnam. It is near Nellore, a little to the south of Nellore on the coast. It is an important port town, Krishnapatnam. There is a Tamil inscription. It's a trade guild inscription. This trade guild inscription refers to some contribution to the local temple on their merchandise, which they imported through various sea-going vessels. So these are the vessels named by these merchants. They refer to 5 kind of vessels. On each vessel, the merchant on each vessel, they have to contribute one panam to that local temple. So there is a variation according to the vessels. According to the size of the vessel, it is the contribution varies. So it starts with 1 for Marakalam. Thoni is again 1, Kalavam half, Vedi quarter, and Padavu. Padavu is the same as Padalu, quarter. See, Vedi is found in the west coast. Some Kerala inscriptions also refer to Vedi, a coasting boat. It is used in the Kerala coast. Padavu is also it's a coasting thing. We do not know whether these may be sea-going vessels, Marakalam, Thoni, and Kalavam. And Marakalam and Thoni is Dhoni. It is found on the west coast, east coast, and also it is mentioned in the colonial period very much, and it was used in the trade between Sri Lanka and South India also. And Marakalam, of course, that name is not there at present, but Marakalam is mentioned in the early inscriptions. As I said, in the Baru's inscription, Marakalam is used. And in the west coast, in many inscriptions, Marakalam is used. So Marakalam must be a big ship. Maybe it is illustrated. It may be an Arab-made ship or made according to Arab things. They imitated some Arab ships. We do not know that we have the illustration of some Arab ships are there, but regarding Thoni we have evidence, but other things we have some modern evidence. Perhaps this navy must have consisted of this Marakalam and Thoni, because these alone can transport people as well as horses, or if they needed horses and other things, they needed a lot of things, food and other things they needed to take along with them, because it's not an easy journey. It is more than 1,500 kilometers from South India to Southeast Asia. So they needed a lot of material for food and other items, medicine and everything they needed, and along with the people, along with the soldiers. So it must be an arduous journey. A lot of preparation must have been made. And all these things, again, we have to guess only. We can only guess. We cannot make much about these things. There are some brief references to some preparations made by Sri Lankan kings when they invaded South India, some Pandya and Chola area in the 12th century, 12th and 13th century, where they say they prepared some boats on the Mannar Gulf. Such preparations are not mentioned in any Tamil inscriptions. So all these things we have only guess. So only from these names we can guess. We can, from the names, of course, the names cannot be, the names are very correct, exactly there. and and regarding these some of these names, that Lamuri Desam, we have some evidence later also to say that it was certainly visited by Tamil merchants, and the later evidence is there regarding visiting of some people, some Tamil merchants, and staying there. So many of these Muslim people who are now in Southeast Asia and particularly in Indonesia, they were actually went from the Kerala and Tamil Nadu coast. That is the Anjuvanam merchants. They were the first people, first Muslims who traded with these Southeast Asian countries. So these Anjuvanam merchants, they first stayed in South India on the west coast and east coast, and then they went there. So many of these Muslim merchants were partly, they were Tamilized merchants, Tamilized Muslims who went there, and later they converted many of the local people into Muslim religion. So that way, later the developments, social developments, took place from this time onwards. That much we can say. And there was actually from the Visakhapatnam inscriptions, we can say there was active contact between this Pasai area, or what you call Samudra Pasai, that is just on the east coast of Sumatra, and Visakhapatnam coast. We have some active coast contacts were there, and some people from Pasai, they are found in near Nagapatnam also. So that contacts were there, that continued. So we can say that now that we cannot completely disregard, we cannot disbelieve the naval expedition of Rajendra. But the thing is, the evidence is not so helpful at present. That much I can say. So with this, I will stop. And if there are some questions, I can answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Have I taken much time?
Yeah, it's okay. I think question and answer, there are quite a few questions, but I think it will be a little difficult now to take the questions and explain as the next speaker is present. But I would like to, out of many questions, maybe, I will just take up.
Well, otherwise, you can send me by email.
Yeah, I will do that. What I will do is, there are quite a few questions. I will collect them all and send them over, and we can just add it to this YouTube page. But wonderful. Thank you, sir, for, we didn't want to even tell you it's going a little bit over time because it was so interesting, absorbing lecture, and we didn't want to stop your flow at all. But thank you for a wonderful overview of the Tamil inscriptions, unrelated other language inscriptions. Particularly, I was quite fascinated with the multilingual inscriptions. But unfortunately, what you are saying is that some of the, the local Javanese and other language part of it cannot be interpreted. Likewise, also the Chinese part of the Quanzu, you were saying, cannot be read satisfactorily. That's sad. I don't know what fascinating additional information they would have provided. But this is really a really wonderful lecture. Thank you for that, sir. We'll move over to Kishore.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank the professor, and then introduce the next speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Subbarayalu.
Okay.
Very eye-opening lecture and extremely fascinating. Thank you so much. We, like Badri said, we will do a follow-up with Q&A and add it to the notes of the video. Thank you so much. With that, we are ready to go to our next talk for the day. Our next speaker, Dr. Gauri Parimoo Krishnan. Dr. Krishnan is an art historian, independent curator, and museum consultant who has dedicated 30 years to the arts and heritage sectors. She has conceptualized and developed the Indian Heritage Center and South Asia galleries of the Asian Civilizations Museum in Singapore from their inception to fruition. For those of you who remember yesterday's lecture, there was a mention about the ACM, the Asian Civilizations Museum, and Dr. Krishnan was instrumental in setting that up and developing that. She has also curated major international exhibitions of Asian and Indian art. She has taught museum studies and curatorship at the Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. She was the inaugural chief curator of the Prime Minister's Museum, the Pradhan Mantri Sangrahalaya in New Delhi. Dr. Krishnan's research and publications include the Arts of India, the Asian Ramayana, the Buddhist Arts of Asia, the Indian Diaspora, and the Indian Trade Textiles to Southeast Asia. She is a recipient of the Commendation Medal and Public Administration Medal for her contribution to the arts and heritage sectors in Singapore. It is also worth noting that Dr. Krishnan is the daughter of Professor Rajendra Parimoo, who last year spoke at one of Tamil Heritage Trust's monthly lectures. He gave a lecture on the Martan Temple in Kashmir, the Martan Temple that was built during the period of Lalitaditya in Kashmir. So Dr. Rajendra Parimoo had given a lecture on the Martan Temple last year, and Dr. Gauri Krishnan is the daughter of Professor Rajendra Parimoo. Her talk is on the story of Indian textile trade from Cairo to Malacca. We now welcome Dr. Gauri Krishnan to deliver her lecture.
Namaskar, everyone. I'm actually sitting in Srinagar and also conducted a documentation or tour of the Martan Temple with Professor Rajendra Parimoo. So it's a very interesting coincidence that we are referring to this very, very sacred and very holy site that really requires resurrection. Okay, coming to the...
Can I share the presentation and then run
yes,
it?
please.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Yeah. So thank you very much to the Tamil Heritage Trust, Mr. Sham and Mr. Badri and Kishorji for your very kind invitation and also patience. We were quite worried that this speaking from Kashmir will perhaps not be possible for me to do so, but because of the kind cooperation of my host in Srinagar, this has become possible. So I thank my hosts as well. Moving to the topic of the presentation today, it will be based on my own interest and study of the Indian trade textiles, which is a very rare form of trading goods. These are piece goods that were traded and they came into limelight mainly because of the European trade, but they existed much before that. And we don't have many records of the initial period, earlier periods for the medieval period, for example, say 13th, 14th century. But because of carbon dating and other references from primary and secondary sources, we are now able to reconstruct a fairly sufficiently coherent story of how Indians went on maritime trade and how some of the products like the cotton and silk textiles, which were also dyed and printed and painted, were so coveted all across Asia and also to Europe and the Americas. So for those who are not very familiar with this material, I'll just start by saying that we are looking in this next 1 hour, Gujarat coast, that is the western coast, the eastern coast, the Coromandel coast, and Bengal, because the three major textiles that were traded across comprise of Gujarat textiles from the Coromandel coast, and the Bengal linens. And the Gujarati patolas in particular were very much part of this ancient trade. Moving on to the next slide. I have divided this presentation into 3 parts, where I will talk about the significance of the material and how I got into this research and how we conducted this research. Second, I will talk about the trade and the references to production centers, the ports, the port cities, and the possible routes through which these textile goods traveled. And the third part of this presentation will be more on the artistic tradition and heritage of this material, because being an art historian, I'm more interested in the artistic traditions and how they relate to our Indian classical and regional traditions of, say, mural painting or textile production or weaving, painting, etc., and not so much into the economics of the trade. So in this one snapshot and in this 1 hour, the ambit of this presentation will be quite wide, from the role of the textile piece goods in the intra-Asian and Asia-Europe trade, to its significance within the Asian context, because through the European records, we seem to understand this in the context of the colonization of India and the East India companies of the Dutch, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and the English. But also, we need to put together our own resources, our own sources of internal records from South Asia, Southeast Asia, and China to understand that how these the Asian regional traders played a very significant part or significant role. And we also have now, through carbon dating, found out that the piece goods production and trade of piece goods goes way beyond the VOC and the EIC defined spice for textile trade. Next, what is very important is also through research and the material that we have, we will be examining in the next 1 hour. We have also found out that it's not with the end of the East India Company that the trade actually stops, but it keeps continuing through individual small-time traders between India and Southeast Asia, and the production also, however smaller in quantity or in value, it still continues. So there's the theory of the sharp discontinuity is also needs to be reviewed. Then through this presentation and through my own writing and research, I'm also trying to highlight the artistic value of this material, because it's a very small group of museum curators and textile historians who are looking at this material, but we need to make it accessible to the wider history enthusiasts and other scholars who can also look at this material as another record, because textile may be treated as a work of art, but it is still a record of economic history, and it should be used as an intrinsic source for connecting the dots for the textile trade. And lastly, they are view them in the context of consumption as luxury goods or as heirloom textiles, because that's how they have come to us through the Indonesian and the Indonesian and Thai collections, and it has gone all the way up to China and to Japan, from where these materials are now becoming accessible and available for research. We should also not forget to give due respect to this material beyond its value as a trade good, to its cultural, social, and ritualistic significance it played in the communities that consumed this textile. So on European side, we have the treatment of the same material or similar material as luxury good, but in Asia, we have the same textile treated as an heirloom example. And these are found and preserved as ancestral heirlooms by the communities, the royal as well as tribal communities in Southeast Asia, which is how they have survived. Next slide, please. I'll just backtrack a little on the how this collection came into existence and into the holding of the Asian Civilizations Museum, with which I was associated for 17 years. And this is an example. This is a few slides here show you the significance of this collection, which was presented as a special exhibition in 2011 by my colleague who was part of the team. Myself and David Henkel were the two curators who identified this collection and made all possible took all possible opportunities, research, as well as ability to convince our management that this collection should come to Asia. And there's no better repository than the Asian Civilizations Museum where this should be, this should reside. And through our research in India and through secondary sources or secondary research done by pioneers of textile trade, textile research, we managed to put together this exhibition. So here are a few slides. We can move to the next few slides. I just want to give you an understanding of these are more than 300 artifacts, from which we had about 150 on display. And the book, How India Clothed the World, had just been published at that time, which became like our Bible or the go-to resource among many other books, of course, by scholars who have worked on textile trade, such as Methibel Gittinger, John Guy, Ruth Barnes, and the others. And also we have many important collections in museums in America and England. Also in France, where we were very much interested in exploring possibilities of research. We also went on research trips to India. We went to Gujarat and to Coromandel Coast to understand the production centers from where some of these textiles would have emerged or would have been produced 300, 400 years ago. Next, please. Yeah, these are some views of the textile display. Right in the left corner, you can see a horizontal patola, which has been actually reconstructed by the patola weavers, double ikat patola weavers from Patan, based on examples from museums. So this research has also helped the weaving community look at museum collections to recall their memory, and from their own study, reconstruct some of these textiles production, which through their own heritage they have forgotten. So these are some of the examples that I want to highlight. The textile in the diamond shape, the red diamond shape, is something very unique. It is produced in Coromandel Coast, perhaps at Pulicat, and it is something that is entirely hand-drawn and mordant resist dyed. So you can see that red color in the middle would have been produced by use of che root, which is one of the natural herbs that is found in Tamil Nadu, from where these this dye has been extracted. And what is very unique is that some of these textile patterns would have been transmitted to the production centers in India, where the craftsmen, say the Coromandel Coast craftsmen, would have learned the requirement and the specifications sent by the courts in, say, Sumatra or Java or even Thailand to produce textiles of particular interest to them and use to them. Next slide, please. This is our research at Patan, part of the team that went to study the production of the double ikat textile, where we saw many stages of the production, and we understood that the entire family gets involved in this production. And when we asked, like, who specializes in what, they said, no, everyone learns everything. And we saw women as well as men involved in the production work. and it's something that is done as an entire family activity. Of course, they use chemical dyes, but they also prefer to use natural dyes. Next slide, please. And as we understood as you can see here, the man in blue shirt is doing the tying of the yarn before it is put on the loom for weaving. So it's a very mathematical expertise that one has to learn. Of course, it is learned through family traditions. So each one seems to know how to tie these, but there are more than 30, 40 patterns which people begin to learn from young age. And as they become more and more advanced, they enter into the higher stage or the more advanced stage of weaving, which the two men on the loom are actually doing. Next slide, please. Then we also did a study of examples from the various museum collections. So here we have some examples from the Government Museum in Chennai, and we also visited the private museum of Jagdish and Kamala Mittal in Hyderabad to understand different types of textiles as well as how they were produced and how they were collected. Next slide, please. Saraswati Mahal Library in Tanjore also has a very interesting collection of samples. Now, these were used because it was a very ancient library, almost 300, 400-year-old. They have examples of material for book binding that was also used as samples. They were also used as samples in the library, in the collection of the library for book binding. So we managed to see some hundreds of examples of cotton printed textiles, that is block printed textiles, as well as mushroom, which you can see in the extreme right. Next slide, please. This was a study of the production of indigo at Villupuram and also natural dyeing of indigo at Pondicherry at the Auroville. And we also managed to learn the different stages of production of indigo right from cultivation to dyeing. Next slide, please. Part of the journey also took us to Masulipatnam and to Srikalahasti to see both the block printing techniques as well as the hand-drawn technique. And again, we found traditional painters of the Kalamkari tradition learning from museum collections of what their ancestors had produced in the past. So this Kalamkari tree of life in the left corner is what was reproduced by the artist, looking at an example from his from a museum piece. So this was, in my view, a very important stage where traditional craftsmen are learning to revive some of their ancestral heirloom traditions by looking at museum examples collected a few decades ago. Next slide, please. Another stage of our research also took us to taking the scientific approach, where we use laboratory technology to carbon date the textiles using some samples of the yarn, which we sent to the labs to do the analysis for the dating of the textile samples. And we also conducted the dye research. So some samples were sent to a lab in New Zealand to study the type of dye that was used. And that one dye that we were exploring was based on che root, the red color dye, using Oldenlandia umbellata, and the various other types of red sources of red dye used in production of many of these textiles. So we wanted to see what type of dye was popular in which geographical location or in which period. Next slide, please. So coming to the trade aspect here, I'm sure everyone is familiar with the VOC and the British East India Company and the French East India Company. And much of the textiles that we see in the European collections either come out of out of collections that were in the European side or in the Americas. But we also have, next slide, please, examples of textiles that have come out from the Indonesian or Thai collections, which also came out on the market and were made available in Europe. So this is a very recent phenomenon, and that's why it is worth mentioning that some of these textiles could have remained in the regions where they were collected historically because of their heirloom status, but because of economic hardships, many of them were sold off to dealers who brought them out into the international market, which is how we also managed to acquire this large collection for the Asian Civilizations Museum. So while textile trade is very important for the expansion of European power into Asia, and the role of textile as exchange good or peace good, Indian trade textile peace good as exchange of value for spices in Indonesia or in Thailand and other countries of Southeast Asia. It is also very important that the European traders of the VOC or EIC also came to the ports in, say, Gujarat or in Coromandel Coast or Bengal to collect these textiles. And with this slide, what I would like to highlight is the role of the hinterland and how the hinterland played a very important role in the supply of yarn, actually cotton, starting from raw cotton. So growing of raw cotton, weaving of the yarn, dyeing of the yarn, and also weaving coarse and refined textiles, and the finer textiles, which were then used for printing as well as for dyeing. And so in this map, you can actually see centers like Cambay being very important, followed by Randeer and Surat, which were major ports on which you have presence of the Portuguese, the Dutch, the British, and the French. And centers like Dabhoi, Vadodara, Navsari, Surat, Gandevi, and also here Nadia, Ahmedabad, serving as very important hinterland from which the materials were collected by the runners or small-time suppliers of textiles and brought to the ports, from where then they were purchased by the European traders. And we have very important traders in many goods, including the cotton and silk textiles like Virji Vora in Gujarat, about whom there are legendary stories and also recorded by French travelers in the 17th century. There's also Taverneau mentioning the importance that Virji Vora commanded, for example, in Gujarat, or Shantidas Javeri, whose descendants still exist and are still involved in textile trade even today, manufacturing of textile today in Ahmedabad. So there are many interesting records from French as well as from regional Gujarati records of the importance of traders. There's not much time we can go into, but there is also a community heritage that I would like to talk about, that both the Gujarati Muslim as well as Gujarati Jain traders went into trading as early as the 8th century. And we have Jain records through texts like Kuvalya Mal or Samaraicha Kaha of the 8th century, where records of ports in Southeast Asia like Kadaram and also Ratna Dweepa and Suvarna Dweepa and so on and so forth are mentioned. So, and also there is a Shreshti, a gathering of the Shreshtis, or the gathering of traders, where they mention what goods, I mean, they exchanged news with each other. And they also mentioned what kind of medicinal herbs they took to Suvarnabhumi and what they brought back from Suvarnabhumi. And so there's a lot of record of the types of materials they exchanged and the various deshas, or countries or locations, geographical locations in Southeast Asia, which can be identified with some of the records we have from the Tamil sources also. So there's a lot of possibility of corroboration that has not happened yet, but it's possible to do as part of research going forward. There's also another French scholar, a French traveler who was a member of the East India Company, French East India Company, who came to actually do the study on the grassroots level of actual production of textiles. So he stayed for almost 10 years between 1766 and 1776, and produced a very detailed manual of each and every stage of textile production, dyeing, printing, and so on and so forth. And this is a very good record, but it also shows that this is how transfer of skill happened from India to Europe, and how in time to come they sort of advanced their research using chemical dyes and machine printing, and how within 200 to 300 years the entire production on the Indian side suffered because of the influx of European textile into Indian market. But that's another story for another time. Moving on. Next slide, please. So coming to the title of this talk, what is the importance of the connection between Cambay and Malacca? And what is the role of Gujarat or Gujarati traders in Malacca? So this is a very important quote among the many important records that has been produced by Tome Pire in Summa Oriental. He says that the Cambay merchants make Malacca their chief trading center. There used to be 1,000 Gujarati merchants in Malacca, besides 4,000 to 5,000 Gujarati seamen who came and went. Malacca cannot live without Cambay, nor Cambay without Malacca, if they are to be very rich and very prosperous. All the cloths and things from Gujarat have trading value in Malacca and in the kingdoms which trade with Malacca. So this already gives us a very good picture of the scope of trade that existed in the late 15th century. And also this would have already existed when the Portuguese arrived. And how important role the Gujarati textiles, when they arrived into Malacca, played in reaching out to smaller islands and smaller consumers or communities that consume these textiles within the Malay archipelago. So this is something very important. This quote has a very wide repercussion and gives us a very good understanding of what was happening in the 15th and early 16th century. Next slide, please. I will continue with the slides because it's too time consuming. But for those who are not very familiar with the materials that were traded, for example, it's also very important that there is Gujarat or Cambay, and after that Surat were also used as transshipment hubs. So we have textiles coming from we have trading goods coming from Aden to Gujarat, like opium, raisins, madder, indigo, rose water, silver, seed pearl, etc., as well as dyes, which were then collected by the Parsis, the Turks, the Turkoman, deposited by these traders who were either Parsis, Turks, Turkomans, or Armenians. And they came up to Gujarat, and then they would go on further to Southeast Asia through Maldives, and also, as Professor Subbarayalu was talking about, the islands like the Nicobar, Andaman Nicobar, and reach Kadaram, or the Malay, or even Samudra Pasai. So both these, Aceh as well as Kadaram on the east coast of Malaysia, were very popular destinations for the shipments that were which were collected in either Gujarat or on Coromandel coast, and then sent forward down to Southeast Asia. There's also a mention of how many ships came from Gujarat to Malacca, and how much worth of goods they carried with them. And from the city of Cambay itself, there are so many types of cloths. So there's also a variety of cloths that have been listed through Dutch sources by Rutger Larhoven, and as many as 200 types of textiles were actually in the heydays of the textile trade, traded between India and Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. This is an example of the kind of ships that were built in Gujarat, because not much research has happened in this area either. Although this research is only restricted to the specialists, maritime historians, and not well known outside. But a Gujarati dough can go all the way up to Aden, or has also gone all the way up to Kerala, and then perhaps also to Malacca. So these were the types of ships that were produced, and currently also produced in Mandvi, which I happen to see. Next slide, please. Now we come to Coromandel coast, and of course we have all the way up to Andhra Pradesh and Odisha. When we say Coromandel coast, it's not just restricted to Tamil Nadu, and we have many types of textiles produced all along, and all the way up to Bay of Bengal. And there were many important ports right from the 13th, 14th century, starting with Kayal and all the way up to Pulicat and Masulipatnam, and further up into the Bay of Bengal to Tamralipti. Again, here very important records have come to light about the hinterland, and how productions centers in hinterland actually supplied material to the port cities. And there are also interesting documents produced by the French, Dutch, and the English, reflecting on the trading practices of the Indian merchants, how they used to pay in advance to the workers, the weavers and the dyers and the painters, and how they were paid very little, money for their efforts, but they used to earn a lot of profits, including lending money to the European traders at the interest rate of anywhere between 7 to 12%. So that, not going into the economic aspect of this trade, I'm focusing mainly on the artistic aspect. Moving on to the next slide, please. I would like to now highlight another quotation from Summa Oriental about the Pulicat-Malacca relationship as well, where Malabaris came to Pulicat to take their companies. So this merchandise would come from Gujarat and would be collected on the Malabar coast, and then the merchant would come to the Coromandel coast, and they collected more material from there, and then they would set off towards Malacca, and they would do this 3 or 4 times in a year. The cloth from the Coromandel coast, which I will show you very soon in my slides, was actually of a very fine quality, and they had beautiful hand drawn, that the kalamkari, the predecessor of the kalamkari technique. And so let's go straight into the slides now. But I also note down the various ports in that quotation, which you can read later on. I also want to highlight one important source from a Tamil stone inscription. I think Professor Subbarayalu has also referred to it, from Lubotuo in Barus in Sumatra of 1082, where also there is a mention of the merchant community, like we have in Gujarat also, of the Ainuruvar Guild, which requires all the merchants to pay a fee to enter into trade to this merchant guild. So it's a very interesting record of the methods in which the guilds operated and practiced their trade in a foreign land. But the reference to the word spread cloth is also very important, because when you see the slides of the visuals of the textiles, you will realize that many of these textiles are also floor coverings. Next slide, please. We can move to, this slide is actually from, shows the trade routes and expanse of the Indian and the Asian, West Asian and Southeast Asian trade, which brings us to the one of the examples that I'm going to show came from Cairo, which is right here, and Berenike, which refer to hand-drawn, hand-block cotton textile from Gujarat. And this is actually the very first evidence of a tangible object, which talks about why Indian trade textiles were so popular in West Asia as well as in Southeast Asia. And of course, we already know from the Greek sources, from Pliny and from the Erythraean Sea records, that the Indian trade textile, especially the indigo dyed textiles, were used by the Greeks as early as 2nd, 3rd century BC. So, and if we go back even to the Indus Valley, we know that there were navigation along the coast, and there were maritime exchange of trade goods going back to the time of the, say, 2500 BC. But we again come back to the period that is under review here, based on the textile examples from museum collections. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is an overall slide showing the various ports. So you can see Kedah in Malaysia on the left side, that is on the east side, and you have Pasai and Barus and Gresik on Sumatra coast. Then you have Java, the Banten, which is where the European trading post, the Dutch trading post developed, and also trade from where textiles would be then further disseminated to the various smaller islands over the smaller boats that the traders would come from the various islands to the main port. There were also many textiles that reached Sulawesi, which you will see in my slides very soon, and also Moluccas. These are the areas where we already have Dutch trading posts established as early as the 17th century, early 17th century. Examples of Indian trade textiles have also come from Philippines and from Japan, which you will see in the slides. Next slide, please. In the reference to the title of this exhibition, of this talk, the site is actually called Fustat, and that is on the outskirts of Cairo. And there are other two sites, Berenike and Qusayr al-Qadim. These textiles were collected by the Ashmolean Museum, and they are kept for research. These are really small fragments, which are surface finds. They're not excavated, but they are surface finds. They're just small fragments which could have been discarded as part of, administrative records, which were just thrown along with bundles. And so these textiles would have been used as cloth to tie the bundles of administrative records. And they were found along with the papers. And they have been carbon dated as well, and some of them date as early as 13th, 14th century. There's one example here recovered from Berenike of the 5th century. So we can actually see examples ranging from 5th to the 10th to the 14th century in this 3 slides, which as a student of Indian art history, I would like to very much highlight, can be compared with materials from, say, our Ajanta murals or our representation of, creepers and nature in early Buddhist art, or even Gupta and medieval art examples from various sites all over India. So these motifs are not alien, are very relatable and very indigenous, and can be seen as something that was very much popular beyond India as early as before the term globalization became popular. Next slide, please. Highlighting an unusual, or rather a popular example of geese pattern. So you can see this is block printed, and there are 2 blocks which form a circle with a floral motif in the middle, and all around you can see geese surrounding it. And this kind of textile was used as or was collected as an heirloom textile. This is also dyed using the madder, and it has been collected and preserved almost for 500 years or more by the community of Toraja, by the Toraja community in Sulawesi. This would be used for special rituals as backdrops, or hung from poles and structures of the houses, and very much revered as collections of their ancestors. Next slide, please. So in part of my research, I have tried to see where has geese pattern been used in India. And here I just assembled 3 examples, 2 from Jain manuscript painting and 1 from Ajanta. And so in this manner, I'm trying to see the internal artistic records also, to see the antecedents of each and every pattern that has been used in the trade textiles. This is an ongoing research, of course. Next slide, please. Another very important hand-drawn examples from Nagapattinam, from Petaboli, Masulipatnam belt. This is a huge textile collected by the Victoria and Albert Museum. It is perhaps patronized by the Deccani court, which has an interesting documentation of court scenes, celebrations, processions, and the glory of the royal community or the patron. And you can also see some of these textiles. The one on the right was used as a kanat, or as a wall for the indoor or the tents. So some of these have either Persian elements in them because they were patronized by the Deccani courts, or they could also have been patronized by the Hindu courts. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Since we are running out of time, I'm just skipping some of these styles. We have also gone on to study some of the block print samples. So these are typical sample books which we found from Pethapur in Gujarat near Gandhinagar, which was a production center for the block makers, to the printers or the dyers, who would then print these onto cotton textile, dye them, and then trade them onto the, or sell them onto the Muslim textile traders. Most of them were either Shia Muslims or Sunni Muslims, and you can also see the names in Gujarati, right? For the carvers, the wood carvers who would make these patterns on the wood block, depending on which trader gave them order for which pattern, which design. And they were also, you can see here a Thai inscription, which says Muscati. So these are the traders who then ordered these textiles to be printed and sent to Thailand for the royal court who were interested in acquiring these textiles. So with these two examples, you are able to actually understand both aspects, the production of the blocks as well as the production of the textiles, and how far they went all the way from Pethapur to Bangkok. Next slide, please. And antecedents of these patterns I can find in textiles as well as architecture of Gujarat, as well as the Coromandel Coast textiles. So this is called the Tumpal pattern, and it has become very popular in the trade textiles as a border, as a design for the border of the lungi or the sarong that the men as well as women would wear in Southeast Asia. Next, please. Yet another example of the Tumpal pattern, which actually I have tried to relate to with the Adalaj stepwell in Gujarat. So I'm constantly trying to see where the patterns have appeared in Indian context and how they have been reused with a different context in the Southeast Asian textiles, which were essentially for trade. Next slide, please. Also, the textile pattern on the sarong of this seated Ganesha from East Java of the 13th century in the Rijksmuseum. You can see the textile pattern on this sarong, which would also have been produced as part of the trade textile, or as a reference for that would have come from a trade textile and then incorporated into traditional sculpture. Next slide, please. There's yet another interesting group of textile. Now we are coming to figurative textiles. So these are called the dancing girls, for the want of a better name. But inspiration and reference to these come from Jain manuscript painting. However, in the earlier stage, such as the 15th century that you can see here from the carbon dating, these were produced using kalam or painting in Gujarat and would have been, of course, dyed. And you can see they are very, very intrinsic, very, very intricate, and each and every pattern on the garment of each of the figure, the female figure, is unique. So this also shows the variety of textile pattern already existing in India at that time. These were used as heirloom textiles in Indonesia, and many of them were also found in Sulawesi. Next, please. A reference to that I have found in the wooden patlis or manuscript book covers, where you see the presence of dance and music as part of the celebration as a very important cultural event. Next slide, please. Another example from Jain miniature painting. Here you can see Indra Sabha. So there are many apsaras. You can see rows and rows of dancing figures. These are the apsaras of the Indra's court. So this could have possibly been the source of inspiration for the trade textile. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then we have by mid-15th to mid-17th century, the production would have been not have been able to catch up with the demand for the hand-drawn and dyed textiles. So the production centers would have resorted to block printing for faster production. So now you see an example here before you. It's a standard set. You can see the same block has been reused, and there's just a slight difference in the color of the sarong. So this also gives us an idea of the demand and supply and how it impacted on the production and the artistic quality, and how certain standards or aesthetic standards were kind of compromised. Next slide, please. Yeah, examples of the parrot lady, woman holding a parrot, is also something which we find in Indian architecture. So this is a doorway of a river, doorway of a Buddhist cave, Buddhist temple in Ajanta, cave 26 of 6th, 7th century, also showing the river goddess holding a bird. Next slide, please. Yet another example of the block printing where you see women or the Apsara wielding weapons instead of holding a parrot. So from a very Shringaric reference or inspiration, you also see a very dynamic or almost like a warrior-like reference to the role of the Apsaras in the textile. All these were found from the Indonesian sources. So they were collected. Now, this is an example which has a background in indigo. So these were the two very consistent colors among many other colors that were found on the Indian trade textiles. And both had medicinal value as well as sacred value to the communities that collected these textiles. Next slide, please. And again, I try to find a source for these textiles. You can see there were composite animals in the previous textile and apsaras, and you see similar kind of configuration on temple walls in Nagara temple architecture. So it is not something too far remote for the Indian craftsmen or the designers of these textiles to visualize, but for a completely different purpose and for a completely different market. Next slide, please. These are examples of women as warriors. These are apsaras or devanganas found on Indian temple architecture, Gujarat and Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. So I just juxtapose this with the textiles to show that this imagery or this iconography still exists in Indian temple architecture or in the vocabulary of the craftsmen who would have been engaged to produce these textiles. Next slide, please. We have elephant riders, dancers playing, stick dance, horse riders. These are also block printed textiles, which have been found from an island called Babar in Indonesia. So very, very remote corners of Indonesia, these textiles have reached. And so one really wonders what would have been the motivation and how the European textile trade actually facilitated a kind of a lifestyle and culture in these remote islands where textiles from remote corners of Gujarat and Coromandel coast were utilized as heirloom textiles. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, this is the textile which I referred in the beginning, which has been reproduced by the Patola weavers in Patan as part of their revival of their heirloom tradition. And some of these textiles were used again in the Indonesian courts. They were used as backdrops for various ceremonies, even marriage. And they were also used for wearing as garment. Next slide, please. These are more examples of textiles which were used as shoulder cloths in Indonesia. I'm not going to go into details. I hope you're reading the dating. Some of them have radiocarbon dating, which is extremely important in ascertaining the age of some of these textiles. And we generally believe that, silk being so fine and so delicate would not have survived, but some of these textiles have survived almost more than 200 years. And because of the climatic conditions in Indonesia, where they were always aired, because they would always come out for ceremonies and rituals and then go back. So they have survived the weather condition despite being a humid region. So it's again a very unusual phenomenon, which is why we are able to actually see these textiles. Because in Gujarat, you can't find these textiles anywhere, except, of course, the Calico Museum, which went into collecting these materials at the beginning of the 20th century. But traditionally, as heirloom textiles, these were never collected and have not survived in any families in Gujarat. Next slide, please. Yeah, as I was mentioning, this the patolas are also used as trousers, as garment. And here is an example of a Raja from Indonesia wearing his coveted patola outfit, or the patola pants. Next slide, please. For the textiles or the patola patterns, especially the geometric patterns, we also have references from Gujarat Rani Ki Vav, which is a stepwell in Patan itself. So on one hand, you have an architectural heritage of the 11th century, and you have textile examples of 20th century. Similar patterns have actually remained in usage or have evolved over time and have still existed in production of textiles. So how aesthetic qualities and design patterns from one medium, such as sculpture or architecture, has also survived in decoration in textiles, metalware, and even terracotta, for example. So this is also a very interesting phenomenon of understanding how textile traditions, design patterns and design aesthetics actually transcends different boundaries of different media. Next slide, please. This is from the Jama Masjid in Cambay, and I was very surprised to find a similar pattern found on a Muslim monument in Cambay and patola textile made for Indonesia. This is a shoulder cloth. So besides Patan, patolas are also produced in Cambay, Surat, and adjoining areas to meet the demand of and the production centers sort of came up in all these areas. Next slide, please. This is again a very unique textile collected from Timor, and it is a Gandabherunda for the South Indian, or for the Karnataka region. Gandabherunda is a very important motif, which also today used in as a symbol, as a state symbol, but it has also mythological importance, which is associated with Narasimha and the importance of calming down, how Narasimha, after killing Hiranyakashipu, had to be calmed down. And Shiva takes the form of this Gandabherunda and comes to calm down the wrath or the anger of Narasimha. So this is an interesting hand-drawn textile, which we have actually photoshopped to show you that there is this double-headed bird with elephants in its claw and elephants in its tenon, actually taking on a very fierce form of Shiva, which has been produced as two textiles. So you can see it's an uncut piece good. So this and this are actually two parts of a larger textile, which would be cut and then joined together, which we have done through Photoshop to just give people an idea of how it would have looked had it been used in the context in which it was produced. So this is an example where we feel that it would have been used for a particular ritual in South India, but if somehow it made it to a far-flung textile, a far-flung country like Timor, where it was collected as and preserved as an heirloom textile. Next slide, please. Again, I have these example of a textile which is in two parts, but it needs to be cut up and joined together to make it into a more squarish textile. which were collected regardless of their original purpose for which they were produced, as hangings for different rituals and ceremonies in Indonesia. Next slide, please. This is another textile also found from Indonesia, which is called the day and night pattern. So you can see this textile has two backgrounds. This is mainly tree and leaf motif, which is again very early. It has been carbon dated to 1300 to 1523. Of course, the range is quite wide, but we can safely say 14th, 15th century. And another textile which also is in parts. So these would have been used as shoulder cloths or as sarongs, but they have been uncut and they have been preserved as they came. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Oh yeah, sorry. Can we go back to the previous slide? So here, actually, very interestingly, we have two examples, one from 12th century and one from 18th century. This is the grape leaf motif. The one on the left has been collected from Egypt, and the one on the right has been collected from Indonesia. So here, with this one example, I'm trying to showcase or bring to your attention how the same motif has survived almost 600 years and is being produced for the various foreign markets, and it has withstood the time, and its popularity has really sustained almost for 600 years and could have been even longer. Next slide, please. Next slide. So with this group of textiles that is called rain pattern or small leaf pattern, we are coming into a kind of a ritual for which these textiles are used. And this is from Toraja in Sulawesi. Next slide, please. So you can see the same textile has been tied to this buffalo, and some of them have been hung on these ropes, which is part of a ceremony for a death ritual. And this is a very big collective activity where the whole village comes together and to celebrate or commemorate the death of an elder, someone who has lived a ripe life and at a mature age who passes away. Then a certain ritual is conducted where many buffaloes are slaughtered. But apart from there, the interesting part is that the heirloom textiles are still being used for some of these rituals from where they have been collected and have become now museum pieces. Next slide, please. We are also using examples of, so as part of the documentation done by my colleague, he also found that some of these textiles are now produced very cheaply as, hand printed or even screen printed for reproduction and decorating the various buildings used in the ritual. Next slide, please. These are examples of tree of life motif. With this, I'm actually trying to highlight to you how different production centers cater to the various locations from where these textiles were commissioned. So the one on the left is for a European market, and one on the right is for the Southeast Asian market. So you can see the difference in the color scheme and in the refinement of the production or the painting. Both are hand-drawn, hand-painted, and mordant and resist dyed. But the flavor of both of these textiles is very, very different. Next slide, please. And references to these textiles I have also found in the Islamic architecture of Gujarat, such as the famous Sidi Syed Mosque. I'll just take one more minute and I'll wind up here.
No, it's fine. Go ahead. We have time.
We have time? Okay.
We have time. Another 15 minutes we have.
Okay. I think we have almost come to the end of this presentation. So yeah, so I'm just again showing you some of the antecedents or references from architecture, which could also have contributed to the evolution of the textile patterns, which were meant for the trading purpose. Next slide, please. This is a very unique Islamic hanging, which we have deciphered. It has Quranic verses, and this would have been used as a canopy, possibly produced in the Deccan region, which has been also deciphered, and the verses from the Quran have also been identified. So it looks like many of these textiles were also produced for the Islamic market in West Asia. Besides, of course, the Fustat or the Cairo example that we saw, almost carbon dated to the 12th, 13th century, all the way up to 20th century or early 20th century, Kalamkari textiles, printed and painted textiles have been sent to the Persian and the Arabic markets from the Coromandel coast. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a unique textile which is acquired in Indonesia, but it has references to perhaps the Buddhist architecture, this particular design. And there's a possibility that it could also have been produced for the Burmese market. But this is just speculation. We do not have any other records to substantiate that. As part of our curatorial research, we have been looking for examples of how to identify a textile with a market. And so this is part of the ongoing research. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, now we are coming to the Thai market, and this is a very good example of, again, a very, very refined textile meant for the royal court and for the normal consumption. So from the Coromandel coast, we have yet another very important demand, both Gujarat as well as Coromandel coast, from Thailand, from Thai royal patrons. And if you look carefully, these textiles are so finely produced and painted using very, very thin brush, and then they have been mordant and resist dyed. So you see a range of colors now in these textiles. There's a yellow, there's a green, there's a red, there's a blue. So each stage of dyeing would have required a very specialized technique of blocking. So this is how the resist dyeing has come about in the Coromandel coast. Next slide, please. And one of the Thai scholars in recent years has also revived this whole technique of block printing. The reference to that you already saw in my previous slides. So she has gone to Pethapur and commissioned many of the patterns which were used in the Thai textiles and got them redone and reprinted. So these are sarongs, which are then now introduced into the market. So this is one way in which many textile specialists, contemporary textile specialists, are reviving this tradition and reintroducing it into the market for the appreciation and consumption of urban Indian as well as Southeast Asian consumers. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is possibly for Sri Lankan market. We are not sure, but these are palampor. So these were used as palangposh or textiles for as bed covers or floor coverings. And so the one below is a machine-produced textile, where the one above is hand-drawn. So you can also see a lot of European elements in these textiles, especially the designs on the ends. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I just want to highlight that this is an ongoing research. This is a very new area of understanding the the role of textile in international trade, and in particular the piece goods. They stand at the crossroads of economic history and artistic history, where we need to pay more attention to how they contributed to the economics, not only during the European trade, but also the intra-Asian trade. And in substantiating the role of communication between India and Southeast Asia, the feedback loop, which is very important, as how the consumer communicated to the producer, and how the market forces govern the production and the quality of the textile, is also an area of research that needs to be highlighted. We also need to do further research in the different artistic media that of the different art historical periods that contributed to this evolution of these textiles, and the continuity of this tradition as long as it is continued in the production of modern day textile, but using natural dye and block printing and kalamkari. It would give a lot of encouragement to our craftsmen, and also appreciation of their heritage, if the urban consumers get to understand the significance of this type of textiles and start promoting them. Also, even fashion designers and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to cover a very huge range from maritime history and maritime heritage of India to the role that this textile production can play in contemporary lives of contemporary Indians and the Indian diaspora. That would be something significant and worthy of notice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. In fact, there's a lot of connections that we can make from the previous lecture, where Professor Subbarayalu was talking about inscriptional evidence of the presence of the various Indian merchant guilds. But one of the things that he pointed out was that the inscriptions themselves did not talk about what they were selling, right? Though there is one inscription that you also mentioned that did talk about the clothing in a sense.
The spread cloth. Yeah, right. The spread cloth.
Right. And now, in fact, what is really surprising to me, and again, my understanding is obviously very, very, very limited, that you have evidence of the even as early as 12th century clothing, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, continuously a presence of Indian piece cloths in all these places, and particularly the Southeast Asia. It gives you suddenly a complete understanding of it, that they are produced in Gujarat and the Coromandel coast, and is taken by multiple different merchant guilds from the Anjuvanam, Amjuman, from the let's say the Islamic merchant groups from perhaps Gulf, settled down in India, and the whole of the seafaring other groups. And the primary place, other than, of course, there was also the West Coast sale, but the East Coast was so important because there is a ritualistic connection that, as you mentioned, with, the Gujarat and Sumatra are connected in a Kadaram, or the whole region is connected in a way which is very, it's beyond just mere trade, that there is a ritualistic importance of the goods, cloths, and therefore they are in fact also not just randomly produced and dumped, probably made to order also. Like, this is a marriage of a royal, family is going on, therefore produce it. Perhaps they would have to place the order well in advance. It's fascinating to really, it's just sad that we don't have written evidence, something that we could actually connect to rather than speculating.
Yeah, there's a lot of speculation. There's no oral records, and 19th century wiped out everything. So there's no memory or heirloom traditions, So there's a amnesia, as I say, there's a large period of amnesia. So
Yeah,
we need to piece together something based on what is available through carbon dating and other inscriptional evidences. And actually the textile itself is an evidence.
right. Absolutely.
Don't
Absolutely.
see it as an art object or as a clothing or consumer object. It's actually an evidence.
Yes. And especially combined with the carbon dating, where you could actually pinpoint to roughly the century, the broadly within the era.
Broad period. I mean, it's not accurate, but still it gives you sufficient, reference point.
And again, it was new to me, the Saraswati Mahal, the Calico binding collection. It's just so
Fascinating.
Last 500 years, it's a small, big piece of decaying cloth, but gives you so much of when you have been thinking of history, we have been only talking about numismatics, inscriptions. I've never really looked at textile could be such a powerful primary
resource. Yes.
Fantastic, fascinating, absolutely wonderful. I mean, I was expecting something along the lines of certainly some images of clothing, but didn't really expect that we could go this far back and we have material available. That's just absolutely stunning. Thank you. That was an outstanding lecture. It was a delight. In fact, not only the knowledge part of it, but a colorful picture, and you are connecting that to sculpture and Jaina miniature.
Architecture.
All of that brings together such a powerful visual understanding of the whole thing.
And I also want to add that it's also Hindu, Jain, Islamic. It's all intertwined.
Yes, you are right. In fact, we in Tamil Heritage Trust had made a heritage tour of Gujarat, and besides, of course, all the Dholavira, Lothal, and of course the Patan, Rani Ki Vav. We also went to the Patola weavers. I think probably the same ones that you showed in the image. I can't now fix it. And it was absolutely wonderful, stunning to really see the kind of knowledge that they had been keeping up as families for this long. It's very sad that today we are losing them left, right, and center, and the ravages of the modern, the kind of clothing that we consider today. This is all pushed the back burner. But as we become wealthy, as I'm talking about India core market becoming wealthy, it's quite possible that a lot of these art forms can be revived, and people are ready to pay in a few hundreds of thousands of rupees for a shawl. It's probably not acceptable. I think it's
it is happening. They are all very busy now. They have a lot of orders. Yeah.
Thank you. There are a lot of appreciation messages, not questions per se. There are some probably, but I think we have run out of time, and we have just about a couple of minutes. So if there are any questions, I will collect them and send them over to you.
Sure.
I think everyone in the channel, they are extremely delighted by the lecture. In fact, one is mentioning will be viewed and reviewed many times. Like he's saying, wonderful lecture, great preparation, connects and presentation. So I'm assuming that this person would like to repeatedly view this. There's another Pratibha saying thoroughly enjoyed this lecture. Another Banu Murthy saying excellent. She's done with carbon dating evidence. So there's a lot of congratulatory messages. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining from a hotel room in where you have gone for a field visit to connect with us. That's really wonderful commitment from you. Over to Kishore. Kishore, for you to give the closing comments.
And along with those congratulatory messages, I join in thanking your host today for ensuring good uninterrupted internet connectivity. In fact, for a couple of moments when there was a little bit of a drop in your audio, we were a little concerned, but I think the internet connectivity came back, and overall, I think we were okay. So thank you once again, a day of great learning today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So with that, we are coming to an end of our 6th day. Tomorrow is the final day, and our schedule remains the same. We start at 5:30 p.m. We have 2 lectures. We have Dr. Anirudh Gaur giving a lecture on the maritime archaeology in India, and followed by that, Dr. Lakshmi Subramaniam talks about the politics of piracy and predation in the Indian Ocean. So tomorrow is our last day of this Indology Festival, Sunday evening. We request you to continue to join us in good numbers, and if you have friends, people who might be interested in these topics, please do pass on the link to them.